Usually. I haven't looked.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Give us just a couple more minutes. Just waiting for Peter.
Be right out.
Ooh. Hi, Josh. Can he?
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
That.
Yay.
Well, first try too.
First time tonight it worked.
Exciting.
Just like that in the minutes, please.
I don't know.
Not everybody's here.
I like the red some of you have going on. This is where you want to be for Valentine's Day, right? Everybody's looking at their clothes now. Did I wear red or pink?
Both. I don't have a
Good
red- yeah,
job,
I don't have a
Scott.
red shirt, so.
I'm gonna look at Peter when he comes in, aren't we? Just waiting for one more member and we'll get started. No problem. We're just all looking at you as you come in, so don't worry about it. Musab, thank you for joining us. We had executive session prior to coming out, so that was a little bit of the delay. So we've already actually started the meeting, and next is approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, changes, concerns? All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Josh, who's voting. Next is minutes of the previous meeting. Could I have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion, concerns, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 7. Thank you, Josh. 7-0. Next is communications. Does anyone have any communications? Josh, any communications?
Just got up from the seat.
I didn't see where he went. Okay, I'll take that as a no.
Up in the corner.
I do not, Marie.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Next is our first open session. Before I go through reading this, any takers? Okay, we'll move forward. Next is unfinished business. We have none, and that takes us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Jason. So we have a few members, a few presentations for the board tonight. Our first one is from our team at Wendell regarding our electric bus and zero emission vehicle strategy plan. We had a great meeting with them 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and we're really excited to get this work started, and the team has done a great job with a lot of the details. And they made us all feel better after that meeting about where we're headed and thinking about our transition strategically. So I'll turn it over to Don and he'll introduce the team and get us all kicked off here.
Thank you, Mr. Janestri. So with us tonight from Wendell, I can't see Keith, but Keith's there, Keith Krug, Danielle Wink, and John Havrilla. John, we were part of a kind of a presentation from the Western New York Education Service Council about 3 weeks ago at Lakeshore. Lakeshore Central School District has got, I believe, the only electric bus in the area. I'm not sure of that. But they took us out and we got to ride the electric bus and kind of learn more about kind of the process as to where we're going with electric vehicles and electric buses in particular. And it was interesting. There were a number of school districts that were there. It was interesting after the fact about the amount of phone calls that I got about what we're doing with these folks here. So to echo Mr. Genestry's statements, when we had our kickoff meeting that same day, that Friday, it was actually that afternoon, they put together, and they'll share with you kind of a very impressive and aggressive plan to get us to a point where we have an electrification plan to move forward and to start looking at vehicles. So I felt that day worlds better. It's a big lift, but I felt worlds better about where we were as a district as opposed to where maybe some of my colleagues are. So I'll let the folks at Wendell kind of take over. So John, I don't know if you want to come to the podium, but this is John, and John will share with you kind of our plan going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Fellow. So there's what I did is I put together a presentation. Some of it's a repeat of what I presented to the board the last time, which we can go over fairly quickly because I know that you've got a packed agenda. But basically the bus goals, our scope of work, the NYSERDA program, cost and schedule, and then an update on the status. So again, just to very briefly, this is all driven right now by the mandates in New York State that by 2035, all school buses must be electric, and post 2027, all school buses purchased must be electric. So, and some of the things that we need to look at, what are the implications of battery electric buses on the district's infrastructure, charging, power systems, utility? What are the impacts on the bus routes? How will these buses perform? Will they be able to do the routes that you have, et cetera? And then how are you going to pay for all this? So those are some of the topics. I know this is a little small, but this is really an outline of the work of scope of work, which I believe you have a detailed packet in front of you with the detailed scope of work, which we can go into any level of detail you want to go into. But basically, it's gathering information is the first task. And we're about 90% through that task at this point. We're looking at available EV vehicles, charging configurations, charging infrastructure, implementation cost factors, site constraints. What are the site limitations here that we have? Local utility capacity. We're already in discussions with the utility, site electrical distribution, and future technology expectations and impacts. The technology on battery electric vehicles and charging infrastructure is changing rapidly. We're, in very early stages in some of this technology. EV implementation schedule factors. That includes your funding, availability of equipment, supply chain issues, the utilities' ability to get power to the site. All of those have to be taken into account when we look at a transition plan. And then last but not least, staff training, because this is new technology and the efficiencies of the buses are really determined by how well the drivers drive the buses. They're different, and training the drivers will drastically increase your efficiency on your buses. Proposed scope of work, data collection, which is almost complete. Bus route analysis, we're about 50% of the way through the bus route analysis. We kind of need that before we can get to any of the next steps. The next steps will be conceptual charging strategies, electric utility analysis, which is we've already started, concept development and phasing plan, and then the transition plan cost estimates. Any questions, please let me know. As you may recall, 75% of this study is being funded by NYSERDA. We have a purchase order from NYSERDA. We also have a purchase order from the Sweet Home School District. So 25% by the school district, 75% from NYSERDA. So under this P12 schools program, I don't know, Keith, if you want to just give a quick minute on that program.
Sure. John's doing all the heavy lifting tonight. I think I have one slide. So the box on the left is the program that we applied for on behalf of the school district for the 75% cost shared grant. That program has actually expired at the end of the year. NYSERDA has heard back from school districts across the state that there's still a high desire to evaluate projects similar to the scope we have with you. as well as to continue to look at building electrification or the movement towards what they refer to as clean energy technologies, renewable technologies such as solar, geothermal. So what NYSERDA has done is opened up an existing program for participation by public school districts to also receive the 75% cost shared study. So you can see the bullet list of different things we can look at. We can do, a study of building energy efficiency, clean energy technologies, like I said, commissioning, indoor air quality. So what we're seeing as a trend with NYSERDA is this continuous movement to open their arms more and more to support public schools across the state. And we're also going to, as part of our scope of the battery electric bus study, track funding to help reduce your costs for implementation if and when you decide to, roll out a program. The Environmental Bond Act that was approved in New York State this past November included money for electric buses, as well as other federal sources that we've already spoken to Mr. Feldman about. So we'll continue to look at funding sources to reduce your costs for whatever it is you may decide to do in the future.
Thanks, Keith. So project cost and schedule. Total project cost for the study is $81,520. The school district share of that is $20,380. The NYSERDA grant, 75% is $61,140. And as I indicated, we signed a contract with Sweet Home on 10/3 of last year. NYSERDA takes a lot longer to get things approved, but we received their purchase order on January 9th of this year. So all the approvals are in and we've begun work. The project kickoff meeting was held here on 1/23, and representatives from Sweet Home School District, NYSERDA, and Wendell were in attendance. So schedule, task 1, project kickoff and status meetings. The kickoff meeting is complete. We do have biweekly status meetings that are scheduled, and the first one, I believe, is next week. Tomorrow. That's right. Tomorrow. Time flies.
Good job.
Yeah, I'll be there. So data collection is in process. We're about 90% complete. Route analysis is in process. We're about 50% complete. And you can see the other tasks here that will follow through. I know I blew through that rather quickly, but I understand you're pressed for time, but I'm willing to go through any level of detail you want on either the document that you have in front of you or any questions you have from the presentation.
I was wondering, you mentioned that if we're training our staff, it increases our efficiency dramatically. Is there technology to be monitoring the efficiency of the buses, like beyond reading our meters? Like, is that an additional purchase? How does that work?
Typically, that's an additional purchase. There is a company called Vericity, which was one of the first ones. Most bus manufacturers are now coming with a package that you can buy as an option that basically monitors the efficiency of the bus. It'll also tell you where the bus is at any point in time. It'll tell you the charge left on the bus. It'll rate the driver as to how the driver is doing as far as efficiency goes. It can also be a training tool to help, train the drivers, to help them understand what actions they're taking or not taking that are making it either more efficient or less efficient operation. So yes, there are multiple packages out there now that do that. It'll monitor the health of the battery and gives you a lot of good indication.
Cool, thank you.
If I might, I just would like to add, as part of, and John mentioned it, as part of the meeting on the 23rd, we had our point of contact person from NYSERDA in, and they all toured our new facility over there and took a look at things. And one of the things that we've expressed, the timeline of this is interesting because when this all came down, we didn't know where to start. So we started first with National Grid, and we had a meeting with National Grid, and National Grid, who's our utility provider here. National Grid said, you need to get a plan together. So Steve Rosler's here. Steve, our facilities director, had met these guys at a conference and suggested that we get in contact with them. And we've talked, and it's kind of developed as we sit here today. But we've made point of contact with National Grid and now NYSERDA to really serve as kind of a guinea pig for school districts to kind of build a plan and to be able to do those things. So hopefully with that in combination with our relationship with Wendell, it might open up some additional funding opportunities for us. And we're kind of excited about that. It's an interesting process. Vinny, who our contact at NYSERDA is I think very excited about our relationship. The relationship with Sweet Home, as well as the relationship with Wendell. So I do really believe that we are headed in the right direction and in a good place and in a good time as well. So, and I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention Scott Kennedy too. Scott, our new transportation supervisor, has done a lot of work to this point to get some information to the Wendell team to help us kind of enhance our study. And we're anxious to see kind of how things will kind of play out. But it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, NYSERDA is very, very excited about this as well. Particularly, the Sweet Home project. It's one of the first for them. So they're very interested and very engaged. And since they're funding 75% of it, their project manager is actively involved in it as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say the new facility is beautiful. It was a good job. Very nice facility.
Other questions? I actually have a couple.
Sure.
You heard about my saga with getting my new van. It took a year to get my new van. I'm still concerned about supply chains. We ordered bus last year. We haven't gotten it yet. So I'm really concerned about the supply chain. Are we really going to get these buses and what they need?
There is a supply chain issue. There's no question about it. The buses, a battery electric bus is not going to be any more difficult or less difficult than getting a regular school bus. The batteries don't seem to be the issue right now. The other technology associated with the buses are. So what you're experiencing with a diesel bus, you'll experience with a battery electric bus as well. The other issue that we've got to watch out for, and we'll make sure we address in the transition plan, the timing of that, is you're going to need transformers and switchgear and panel boards to feed the chargers that are charging these buses. Those are long lead items now. We're looking outwards of at least 12 to 18 months delivery on some electrical gear. So that will be taken into account in the transition plan. We'll identify those critical items.
Scott and I went to state convention this year and we attended a presentation about electric buses. And one of the main things they talked about was making sure right size of the battery. You're smiling because you get this.
Yep.
And also to even maybe have an extra battery. What are the costs of these batteries right now?
They vary, but they're not cheap.
Appropriate for our buses.
Yeah, I haven't priced them recently, but you're probably looking at $100,000 to $200,000 for a battery.
For one battery. And they suggested also having a backup battery.
Yeah.
So
For each bus
for each
or
I would-
just having
no.
a store of some
store of
backups?
batteries.
Yeah, just a battery pack, I think, is really what
Okay.
they're looking for.
One extra battery, okay.
And then they also said, make sure, because there's a big computer component of all this, that the IT part of this is going to be critical. So what are we doing with the IT portion of this?
The IT portion, there's several pieces of that. One is all of these chargers will communicate with each other. So you'll probably have one charger per bus, possibly one charger for every 2 buses. We haven't decided that yet. But they communicate with each other. And then there's a piece of software that layers over top of them, which is called a charge management system, which will manage how these buses get charged and charge them the most efficient way possible. That all communicates via an intranet within your area. So that is a piece of it that will have to be. And then the other platforms that I talked about, like the Vericity platform, that's remote on the bus. So these will be communicating with the buses as well. So there is a big IT component to this.
And they stressed to us that, when a bus breaks down, whose problem is it? Is it going to be the mechanic? Because there's so many components to it. Is it going to be IT? Is it going to be the bus garage? And they said it's a lot.
It is a lot, yes. And there's a lot of training that will need to go on. And, in the first, what we're recommending to a lot of people that are moving down this path is to enter into maintenance agreements with both the bus manufacturer and the charger manufacturers and the software companies, at least for a year, if not 2 years, until your people get up to speed on what this all means.
And they said training not only for the IT portion, but if a bus crashes, God forbid, there's special training for that because you can't just hose it down like a regular vehicle. You have to have special training that goes along with that.
These buses do have high voltage DC systems. They're 800 volts typically. So there's training on battery systems, high voltage training, lockout, tagout, safety procedures. We would also recommend training of the local first responders. Because if a bus gets damaged, if the battery gets damaged, there can be a fire hazard. They need to know how to shut off the bus. They need to know where the batteries are located on the bus and how to properly protect the bus. And some of the things that we're working with people on is
That's why they're helping us.
Yeah, that's why we need you.
standard operating procedures. If a bus gets into an accident on the road, when it comes back, where do you put it? We're going to make recommendations on things like that
Where
because
do
you
you
don't
put
want to
it?
put it
You
in,
can put it in your garage.
you wouldn't put it in your garage. We would have to designate a safe space to park it until it can be cleared to say that it's safe.
And how long does a process like that normally take to clear the bus?
Depends on who's maintaining the bus. I mean, if it's somebody from out of the area, however long it takes them to get here and inspect the batteries.
But it's a matter of hours or days, but not, okay.
Brian?
Yeah, first of all, Marianne, you might have a job with Wendell after this.
I've been thinking of these things.
Just a little story here that relates to this. When I had my pool put in, they wanted me to have a Wi-Fi connector to run everything. They said, don't go with wire. Wi-Fi is the way. I said, absolutely not. Wire is a tried and true technology. I'll do the Wi-Fi, but I'm not going to do it without the wiring. And sure enough, the Wi-Fi goes down. And I'm glad I have the direct wiring. So, I would think that there is an advantage to being first, but there's a disadvantage. And just wondering, I would be inclined to say as a district, when the time comes, if I don't know that I want to be first here because there's so many moving pieces and there's a lot of things that sounds like that are going to need to be, ironed out. And it could be very costly if those things aren't, if
There's a risk to
there's a
being the
risk,
guinea
yeah.
pig.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah.
but we
So-
also are getting, first, I know Don said, the people that move the fastest are going to get the most money.
I guess
You're gonna
I'm
get
just
the most
looking,
grant funds.
yeah, I think that's where,
So it's a balance.
yeah.
And-
And I think we would be looking for some guidance if there's any available. I know it's a little bit of a,
And, battery sizes are changing. You mentioned battery sizes, get the right battery size. Battery sizes are changing almost every year. They've doubled in the last 2 years. What does that mean? That means you get better range out of your buses. So the fact that the issue that you may run out of battery out in the middle of the road is less likely to occur. But it does impact what happens back here because now you've got a bigger battery to charge. So you need more power to charge it. Charger technology is changing. They have chargers out there now that one charger can charge 20 buses. We're not sold on that technology yet because if you lose that one charger, you've lost 20 buses. You can't charge them. So we're still more of the philosophy of 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 chargers, and that technology is proven. So, there is safe technologies out there. We are a little bit concerned on some of the bleeding edge technologies. And yes, we will be here to provide you some guidance on that.
And I just wanted to say too, that with the presentation from a couple of weeks ago and the 8 tasks that we have on hand with this project, we're going to be learning a lot more in the next few weeks or in the next 20 weeks, actually, about where we're going and how we need to get there. But I think the most important thing is that we're recognizing that this mandate, while it might be pushed back, is not going away. And that we're getting ahead of the process because we are fully in the agreement that this is not going to go away, that this is a mandate that's going to stick in New York State. And the governor has already proposed in her next budget to start reviewing where districts are in their planning. And just by having this plan together for us, I think we're ahead of the game. We're going to have a lot of the answers to these questions about where we're moving forward with.
Yeah, I would just also add that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty in all of this. Nobody really knows how it's all going to be funded. There's a number of grant opportunities that are out there. But one thing that I just would close with is that from a timing standpoint, immaterial of perhaps maybe some grant funds and things along those lines. From a timing standpoint, this timeline would time out well with our next capital improvement project. So if there are additional costs that wouldn't be funded by grant opportunities, we could certainly look at including whatever it might be, infrastructure, that type of thing, technology, et cetera, to add to the scope of the capital project that would start somewhere around the 2027 school year.
Sorry,
Go
you
ahead.
had mentioned earlier about the tracking system on the buses so that we could, track routes or how the buses, the efficiency and all of that. Do you have any idea what that upgrade looks like in terms of cost?
The hardware is already on the buses standard. It's really the software, and there's multiple vendors that you can choose from.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I could get that for you, but they're typically an annual subscription.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank
It's the
you.
way they work.
With that corresponding, we're going to be talking about transportation in our next presentation. And we're talking about putting GPS on the buses. Would that be an upgrade? I mean, would that go along with what we're doing?
No, it's a little different. I don't know what kind of, I don't know, maybe Scott, but I don't know what kind of output reports we get other than to say that bus 123 is at the corner of Sweet Home and North French. I don't know much more than if we get output about, miles per hour, that kind of thing.
We can see right now, onboard diagnostics, usually about 18 parameters. We can see speed, harsh driving, harsh cornering, harsh stopping. We see idle time, see all kinds of data right now with our current GPS.
So it'll be similar, very similar.
Scott, is that the upgraded one that we're working on getting implemented, or is that the one that we're currently using?
That's in part of the upgrade we're doing right now. We just implemented that within the last 3 weeks.
Thank you.
All the discussion here tonight has been with electric buses, but I mean, we know that there's going to be other options for zero emission. Is this study just purely on electric at this point, or?
This study is
Touch on-
purely on electric. If you want to go into hydrogen, that is the next fuel that's probably the only other fuel today that's really considered zero emission is hydrogen fuel cell buses, which are basically an electric bus with a fuel cell that takes hydrogen, converts the hydrogen to electricity on the bus.
So does that require if, down the line, we wanted to switch, is that a lot of infrastructural change or is it just bus change?
It is infrastructure change. When you look at hydrogen, there's two ways to get hydrogen. You can either have it shipped in or you can generate it on your own on site. Typically for a school district like this, that cost would be too high. In Western New York, they are building a green hydrogen facility. I forget exactly where it is. Do you remember where that is, Keith? It's not far from here, though. It's in Western New York. The state is funding part of it. Plug Power is the owner of it, but it's being funded. It's being supplied power from the hydro project. And so it's considered green hydrogen. They could ship it to you. We'll wind up with a storage container on site of hydrogen. then it would act more like a fuel pump, like a regular fuel pump. You pull up, fill up the tank, and those get much better mileage than, well, not better mileage. They get better distance because they can carry more fuel and they act more like a diesel bus. They won't be as efficient as a battery electric. Battery electric buses are extremely efficient.
Oh, thank you.
Josh, any questions?
No, thank you. I'm good.
So
had
the
a
next
couple,
time, oh, go ahead, Peter.
So you mentioned like training first responders and stuff like that, if there was an accident. Is there technology in this for an emergency shut off? So if someone's in the station and they see that the bus got in an accident, they could shut the bus down remotely from where we are. Is that part of a package? Is there is that
Not that I'm aware
technology
of.
that's there?
It's on the bus. It's not remote.
Okay, so there is no,
Not
like
that
we
I'm aware
can't
of.
sense in the office that, oh, there's an accident on the bus. We need to shut this down. There's not there.
Yep.
Okay, the other thing that I had a question on, and you said like the 20 bus chargers, right? That's cutting edge technology now. Well, that's not going to be cutting edge technology in 6 months. We're talking 3 years from now.
Mhm.
How does our plan look at that? I mean, we could, in 3 years, we could have one charger for 100 buses.
Right.
So is that taken into account in our, like, where you think technology on these may be heading?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are looking at that. You know, it's how good is your crystal ball as to how
I
some of these
understand that, but
technologies
it
will
just-
roll out. But we are definitely in contact with the manufacturers and we're seeing what's coming out. We also work a lot with transit agencies, major transit agencies, New York City Transit, MTA, Washington Metro. Those are where some of the newer technologies are first being applied. And so we work on those projects as well. So, I don't think we would recommend Model 2 chargers to you guys, but some of the transit agencies are doing that just as pilots.
So the next time you come before us will be to fill in the blank.
I mean, we could provide an update at some point in time as to where we are. We've got 20 weeks ahead of us. I think it would be on an as we see fit. We did talk about it.
Again,
We talked about it really on the task sheet.
Right.
There's a couple of natural markers as we get past certain tasks. It makes sense for kind of an update, more or less. But we felt as though that it was important that you saw the overall today. And then as we get to kind of, tasks, I don't remember off the top of my head, but 6 through 8 in that area, that there's some natural times where it would make sense for you guys to see another update.
just because it's so much money and it's taxpayer money, some of it.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure.
All of it.
Correct.
We're,
Right.
that's right.
Right.
Yep. Well, there's some key, as Mr. Feldman pointed out, there's some points, once we reach certain points, we'll have a significant enough progress to really give you a meaningful update.
Call me if you need me.
We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
No, I just want to say thank you. The partnership has been, outstanding. And I think, again, I'll reiterate after our meeting on the 23rd, we just felt way more comfortable about where we're headed because it is thinking about this in a strategic manner and not just, all right, let's buy a bus. We're really putting all the thought and thinking and looking at funding opportunities and strategy more than just, let's get in the game with a bus. And I think that's important. So.
And I also think, since you are, one of the first ones under the NYSERDA program, NYSERDA is very interested in your experience and talking to you to see what can we do to help, not just on this, but in the implementation side of it too. So I think that partnership's going to help.
Sorry, I would also just say, we heard it, that with NYSERDA and the grants, the early bird gets the worm. So I feel pretty good about where we are in the process and our quest for funding.
Thank you for all the
Thanks,
work.
John.
you've been
Thanks,
putting into
Danielle.
it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Keith.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Danielle. Have a great night.
Oh, they're not staying?
They're more than welcome to.
Oh, yeah. No, I
team is
think
here,
they'd be,
so.
yeah, no, they'd be fine.
See you guys tomorrow.
That's not right. Okay. So I'm just gonna. Part two. So I wanted to do this from the podium tonight because we have a lot of our building use team members here today who were able to join us on Thanksgiving, on Valentine's Day, and really appreciate their time. But you should know it's not only tonight that they've spent time with us. We've had 5 meetings of the Building Use Committee, a lot of them centered on transportation, 4 of the 5 centered on transportation, because we all recognized the need to make a change in the way we do transportation. Because if we all agreed that if we continue to do this things the same way we've been doing them, we would not be able to transport kids to and from school on a daily basis with confidence. And so last year, when we were here and we talked about a lot of our spacing issues at the buildings, we also talked about transportation. The board was gracious enough to allow us to form a building use committee. And the committee was basically informed with agreement of the board to examine enrollment trends, spacing issues, transportation, and along with coming up with future plans for transportation in our buildings. We wanted to discuss ideas to improve the overall Sweet Home experience for our students with the challenges that we know that are facing us with increasing enrollment, spacing issues, more services for our students than ever. And so we wanted to get key stakeholders together to talk about these things and make sure that we were doing them in a committee-like way. So this body can occasionally make recommendations to the Board of Education about the future direction of our facilities and the use of transportation. So when the committee met back in November, we discussed some of our goals that we wanted to do, or some of the tasks that were ahead of us. One of them was to discuss enrollment trends and where we are with the district. It's no secret that our enrollment is rising. And this is something that we kind of have to continually examine. And the board was again gracious enough to allow us to do a census this year. And we also purchased a PowerSchool tool that would help us look at our enrollment trends by neighborhood to see what issues we may have moving forward in staffing, or not staffing, but in enrollment at our buildings. We wanted to discuss transportation as well, because we knew of our driver shortage was a serious issue facing the district. And I don't think there's a family in our district that hasn't been impacted, whether they wanted their students to, or their child to do an after-school program or before-school program, where the district for the first time has had to say, you know, we can't do that with equity because we just don't have a driver to make that happen. We also knew with our transportation issues that getting kids to and from school every day is an issue for the district. And it's an all hands on deck operation at the bus garage and transportation center, where there are many days where there are no staffers left in the building, and district office is staffing the phones over there because every available person that has a CDL is driving. So the board also allowed us to make short-term recommendations to ease spacing concerns, and some of that work, you know, we didn't have the committee formed last year, but our buildings had committees over the summer to talk about spacing and improving the experience for our students. And that work, it will continue, but you'll see why we wanted to focus on transportation first. We wanted to make recommendations to the board to ease those concerns. And that process starts tonight. So our committee I don't see our committee ever dissolving really, because we will have these issues for a while. And it's always good to have people together to talk about how we can improve the overall experience for our students through the use of our facilities. So it's a short-term suggestions and long-term planning. So some of the parameters for the Building Use Committee, we wanted to make every recommendation through the lens of DEI. It's important that we're providing transportation in an equitable manner, and that we really said if we can't provide transportation or someone has to stay home because we can't provide transportation for that activity, then we can't do it because it's not fair to all of our students. We wanted to make a recommendation. Oh, there it goes again. I can't. Again.
Feel like you jinxed it, John, with your success earlier.
My fault. Okay. So we wanted to make recommendations to the board based on data and research and not opinion of the committee or committee members as well. It's impossible, we wanted to, and if possible, we wanted to make recommendations through other stakeholder groups as well. We wanted to reiterate too that our recommendations are recommendations to the board, and board policy dictates that any change in start and stop times, for example, which we'll talk about in a minute, need to be approved by the Board of Education. And we also said that, and this was true, and I really appreciated the conversations during our meetings, that every person on this committee is vested in improving the student experience at Sweet Home. We really felt that the conversations were from the heart and that they wanted to make sure our kids are well taken care of. And so they've been great conversations. It's been dialogue and not debate. And I couldn't appreciate the thoughts and gestures of our committee members, many of whom are in the audience tonight, who put in a lot of time and effort to make this recommendation happen. So before we start, I wanted to really recognize our committee members. Board member Amy Battaglia, Don Feldman, Toya Wilson, Bob Polino, Jim Ryan, Karen Delaplante, Scott Kennedy, Steve Rosler, Katie Barilari, Paul Simondera, and Bill Vaughn, many of whom are in the audience tonight and would welcome their comments and perspectives as we move forward in case you have any questions as well. We have met 5 times and it's all been at night, and we tried to keep it to an hour, 15 hour and a half, but it seemed to go longer sometimes because the conversation was flowing very well. We had our last meeting on February 2nd, where we kind of finalized what we want to recommend to you tonight. We started with the overall situation of transportation and space, but the conversation really focused on transportation because it's clear that if we don't make a change, we are not confident in it's a matter of when we won't be able to transport our students on a daily basis, not if. So these changes we really feel, and not feel, but they are necessary. And it's because of the experiences we've had over the past year and a half, where we're just, we're piecing together a staff right now to get our kids to and from school. Committee has also permitted a smaller group. So besides the 5 meetings that we had, there were some smaller group meetings that, to the committee's knowledge, that tinkered with the numbers and the recommendation to make sure it would work. And then I want to recognize Scott Kennedy as well, who took our ideas back to his office to vet them through the use of Excel or his programs back at his office, and then came back to the committee and said, yes, this will work, or no, this won't work. And I think it was during our 4th meeting, maybe, Scott, where we put some idea up on the board, and in about 5 minutes, he said, no, that's not going to work. And we then got to work to whiteboard it and start figuring out a new path. So Scott's perspective on this was really valuable, and everybody's perspective was, but Scott did a lot of work behind the scenes to make this recommendation. I think one of the things we also wanted to point out is that any recommendation we did make to the board, we wanted it to be least disruptive to our families with the most benefit possible. And that benefit was to gain extra drivers in order to make our runs during the day and possibly add runs after school. So our current situation in transportation, 18-19 year, we had 105 drivers, and now we're down to 53. I don't think that's a secret to anybody. Many districts are struggling to find drivers to make their daily runs. Every available driver is working during the instructional day to get our students to and from school. And these are mandated runs. So these aren't things that we're adding as options. These are mandated. District office often covers the phones at transportation, and just so we have one staff member on hand to answer parent phone calls. So I know Mr. Feldman has done that. Other district office members have done that, gone over to transportation just to answer the phone because they're the only ones there because everybody is driving that day. On contract, we're also mandated to provide private parochial school runs, McKinney-Vento student special education runs. So we have over 40 contracted runs right now in the district that are all mandated that we have to do. And our costs for those mandated runs, because we have no drivers available, doubled this year, as the board knows. So we're at nearly $3 million this year in mandated contracted runs, as opposed to $1.5 million in those runs from last year. So not only are we transporting our students, but we're mandated to transport, like I said before, private parochial, McKinney-Vento students, and special education students that might be going out of district for their placement.
Mr. Shastri?
Yes.
Could I just ask, which one of those categories is like the heavy lift in the contracted runs? Is it special ed? That's the majority of
It's a
those
pretty good
runs?
balance.
That kind of
That's one
split?
answer.
It is a good balance between the private parochial and the special ed.
Okay,
Private parochial, we tend to have more students per school. Special ed, we tend to have specialized transportation for 1, 2, or 3, which still uses a driver and a piece of equipment. And
Mhm.
I would say it's a balance.
And yeah, that's a great question. And that's a good point too, because some of these runs might be one student and that we're mandated to do. So.
Many of the McKinney-Vento kids are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Also currently in the district, and we're pleased with this, but we have door-to-door pickup at the elementary level. The committee discussed this idea. I'll get more in that in a minute. There is also no walking radius to and from schools. So we pick up students. I remember meeting Mr. Polino. One of my first times I met Mr. Polino, he showed me some houses around Willow Ridge that you could see from the driveway at Willow Ridge. And yes, a bus stops there. And that is our policy. And that's a safe policy to have. But it does cause more stop and starts for our buses. There's a severe hampering of after-school activities right now that we've just simply cannot provide transportation to, whether it's an after-school program, an extracurricular activity, a before-school program. We are tapped out right now to provide the full Sweet Home experience. We also know that unemployment is low, and we do not expect, while we know our rates are competitive, our benefits are very good, and there's a lot of flexibility in the schedule for our drivers. We are not getting tons of drivers coming through the door to apply for a position. And even when they do, it's a minimum of 3 months to get them on the road and ready to drive if they are not trained properly before entering our building. So, we've definitely, this isn't a thing that the district had to do or wants to do, but I would say from our perspective in district office, this is something we have to do. This is something we have to make a change, or otherwise we're in fear or jeopardy of not being able to transport our students during the day. So the committee looked at those 3 ideas that I just mentioned: walking radius, common pickup areas for elementary students, and stop and start times for the district. And I think one of the things with common pickup area for elementary students and walking radius, the question of safety immediately came up. That anytime you have students, especially young students, walking a distance, whether a quarter mile, half mile, We have to consider safety as a priority. And the committee was not really interested in that, especially when Mr. Kennedy came back to us and told us that it really wouldn't be a benefit as far as condensing runs or having more drivers on the road for us. This wouldn't be a strong benefit. And then we got into the sibling question as well. If you have an older elementary student versus a younger elementary student, can you pick them both up, or does one walk? And it just got to the point where it just didn't seem feasible, and it did not have any bang for the buck, really. So we really focused on letter C, which is our start and stop times. And that would be help us not only transport students to and from school for instructional time, but also for the after school period as well, and extracurriculars, where we could offer more of the overall Sweet Home experience, but not back to the 2017-18 levels where we had double the amount of drivers than we have now. But we do feel like we can put more buses and more drivers on the road after school, before school, with our recommendation that you're about to see. So here it is. And again, we tried to have it least disruptive to our family lives because we realize that people have obligations, and we want to make sure that they're able to meet those obligations in a least disruptive manner. So right now, our recommendation would be to drop off high school students at 7:15 in the morning with a 7:25 instructional time. Currently, underneath that graph, you see the current times. That's a 5-minute earlier drop off than what currently the high school is going through right now. The instructional time would end, or the buses would arrive at the high school at 1:45 in the afternoon, where with an instructional end of 1:54, and departing the high school at 2 o'clock. That's a 12-minute swing. I think it's important to note that if you look at that and you don't think the math lines up right now, the high school currently has a 4-minute pass time between periods. We're recommending that it goes to a 3-minute pass time between periods, which has been done before in the high school. And that would free up some time to get the buses out of the parking lot by 2 o'clock. Then we would group Glendale and Heritage students together. So this is what we call the staggered start and stop times for the elementary, where we would group the next run would be Glendale and Heritage with a drop-off time of 8:10. The current drop-off time is 8:30, so that's a 20-minute difference in drop-off time. The instructional time would start at 8:30, where it currently starts at 8:50 in the elementary level, with a bus arrival at 2:20 and an instructional end at 2:15. And then the buses would depart at 2:30 from the parking lot. That would give, we looked at teacher day and teacher length, and the contract, we're not changing any of that, and the instructional day, the teacher time in the building, but this would help with teachers ushering students out of the building at Glendale and Heritage.
Mr. Janestri,
Yes.
I did not notice this prior, but our 2 elementary schools instructional end is 5 minutes prior to bus arrival.
Mhm. Yep. So this would give us the 5 minutes. We talked about a little, and Bob and Jim, you can chime in here if you want, but we were hoping that because right now the teacher day ends at the same time as instructional ends, there's a difficulty of getting students out to the buses. So this would keep teachers, help have teachers with 5 minutes to help us get those students out of the building.
So part of the instructional time is helping kids get on the bus.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And we're meeting all the regulations as far as teacher time.
Contract.
instructional
Yes.
time with Kids.
Yes. So, there's a lot of files behind all of this and a lot of notes that I know I've provided, and there were a lot of scenarios that we ran through. But this one worked out where the instructional day, instructional minutes that we're required to have are in this plan, as well as the same teacher day, instructional minutes, and length of day as we have right now. So the second group then would be Maple Mere, Willow Ridge, and there was a strategy behind who was in group 1 and group 2. And the strategy was based on geography. Maple Mere and Willow Ridge are closer to the middle school, and it would take less time for that run to get to the middle school to do a drop off and pick up at the middle school. So Maple Mere and Willow Ridge would have a drop off in the morning at 8:40 with an instructional time of 9 o'clock. And that's a 10-minute swing from where it is right now. Bus arrival would be at 2:50 with an instructional end at 2:45. And the bus depart would be at 3 o'clock, which is again, a 10-minute swing for Maple Mere and Willow Ridge from where it currently is. And then it was important with the committee discussed the middle school. We really didn't want to push the day back any further at the middle school. And it was important to stay away from 4 o'clock as much as possible. So the middle school is unchanged from where it is right now. And we felt that was, again, least disruptive and would give our middle school students time for extracurricular sports runs, that sort of thing. The other strategy that we looked at, we looked at changing the order. Maybe have the high school and middle school group together, or Glendale and the elementary at the end of the day, or the elementary at the beginning of the day. But one of the goals of the committee was to be least disruptive to it. And then sports runs were absolutely a consideration at the end of the day. Also, older students being home for younger students in the morning. We know that families have that situation now. And so in the afternoon, and we didn't want to disrupt that situation as well. So there was thought and strategy behind everything you're seeing up on the board. So this is what our current elementary run looks like. From Glendale, Heritage, Maple Mere, and Willow Ridge. So I'm going to talk about the benefits in a minute. But every day for the elementary, there are 40 elementary runs on the road. They are on the road at the same time, and we're using 53 drivers for 40 runs. And so that means if all 53 are at work and nobody gets sick, and we have some extra drivers, but those drivers are for mandated other runs out of district. So we're really cutting it close with 40 elementary runs in the middle of our day. And there really isn't an available driver out there, or one sitting back in the transportation center because there's not a run available. We are using all of our available drivers every single day. So I left the current breakdown up on the left part of the screen, but what the proposed new breakdown would look like and how this would work to benefit us and create extra drivers throughout the day is that the Glendale and Heritage, you would think if you look at it, okay, we're splitting the elementary times in half, but it's not really the case because you got 40 runs and you think, okay, well, we only need 20 for Glendale and Heritage and Maple Mere and Willow Ridge. But in working closely with Scott and the rest of the committee, we wanted to dedicate 25 runs instead of 20. And that would cut down on the time and the length that it would take to transport our students for the elementary schools. So Glendale and Heritage would have 25 buses running between, at the drop-off time of 8:10 to 2:30. And then the next time, Maple Mere and Willow Ridge would have 25 buses. And those buses could be used for both of those runs. I don't know if I'm explaining that correct, Scott. Okay. So we figured we would have an estimated additional buses of 4 to 5 in those groups. Like I said, instead of 20, we have 25. We think we could save 5 to 6 drivers per day, maybe even a few more. And that would be free to do if a sub situation is needed during the instructional day, or they could be free to do extracurricular runs after school to provide more of the Sweet Home experience for our students. But really what our main number one concern is we would have some wiggle room to transport our students to and from school every single day. Also, we're going to explore more bringing back some of those contracted runs that we have. Those 40 contracted runs is important to try and see if we can bring some of those back from a flexibility standpoint and a cost savings standpoint for the district as well. Any questions how this breaks down?
just in terms of, this is on, this page, this page here. So Glendale and Heritage, Maple Merrill, Willow Ridge, there's a 30-minute gap now between them, where before they were. Is that
the same time. Yep.
So that additional 30 minutes is where that buffer, where there's some buffer now? I mean, I'm just trying to understand like how long a run takes. Because like if a run took 40 minutes, let's say, then
Takes
30
20 minutes, based on the math I'm looking at on the graph. If it's leaving the high school at 2 and
So 20
arriving
minutes.
at Glendale and Heritage
Okay,
at
that's
2:20,
so it's 20 minutes in a typical.
and then you
run,
have
is
drop
it?
off time, I imagine.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's where the savings
Yes.
is really coming from, which I think, we talked about it earlier, and I think there was we were trying to figure out the math. But what it comes down to is in that gap, those buses are getting back and then they're going back out.
Yes.
Exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yep. Verify on both sides here. Yes.
Stereo.
Yes. So like I said before, some of the benefits, currently we have 40 buses on the road for the elementary school pickups and drop-offs, plus other buses out for mandated and out of district runs. Staggered times theoretically would reduce the 40 by half, but we wanted to add 5 runs or 5 buses to each of the routes to make sure, we'll ease some of the congestion on buses, but also make the runs faster and cut it down to that 20 minutes that Mr. Leibel, you mentioned.
Mr. Knesset, I
Yeah,
just
go
want to also add in that piece of it, when we looked at the middle school, and I don't remember if you mentioned this, but it was very important to the committee that the middle school didn't go beyond 4 o'clock.
Right.
So in order to make a dismissal time, didn't go beyond 4 o'clock. So in order to make this timing work, in conversations with Scott and kind of the breakdown of the runs that we currently have and looking at the feasibility of all this, we felt as though by adding those additional buses, it not only does what Mr. Genestri says, but it condenses the amount of time in between runs so that we could make the schedule work to fit such that the middle school dismissed before 4 p.m. If we didn't add those additional buses, those runs would go from probably in between the buildings from 20 minutes to maybe 30 minutes, and it would push everything out, probably an additional 20 minutes. And then you're looking at maybe a 4:15 dismissal time at the middle school. And we didn't feel as though that was appropriate.
Absolutely.
So we have with 25 buses at the elementary, that is like a 15 bus kind of wiggle room, which you said you wanted to use some of the buses to bring back contracted runs. How many after school runs? Like how many actual buses would be doing after school runs? Do you have an idea of that?
So, and I'll let other members comment on that, but we felt that we could provide at least a late bus run at all of our buildings with that. And then there's hope that we could add more as this flushes out. But I think that we're confident, and I don't want to speak for Scott, that we could add a late bus run.
And we
that-
currently don't have, do we have any late bus
At the middle
runs?
school, we're using one, yeah.
Okay.
So what I would say,
2 days a week, not every day.
I would say, Kaylee, just to be mindful, and Mr. Genestri did say this before, this scenario gives us the most flexibility.
Yeah.
There are no guarantees at this point. It depends upon if we get 200 kids, additional kids that come in over the summertime and new enrollees, that's a challenge, right? And that we have to figure that out. But what I will say is that once those things get in, that we do have to also work to transport after school band and orchestra and those types of things. So there are pieces that we still need to be mindful of. What may have to happen, and we talked about this at the committee level, our last meeting. One of the things that we're going to look at is to be able to say, and this is just for an example's sake, Heritage Heights, you have an after-school bus, you have one after-school bus on, again, just for example's sake, on Mondays and Wednesdays. here you go, building, you fill it. And then what would happen is there's other neighboring school districts that are starting to do this because of the driver shortages. Parents would sign their children up for the bus so that we knew ahead of time who was going to be on that bus to help the transportation department route that bus so that kids aren't on the bus for an hour and a half. Because honestly, what's happening now is, the middle school, when we have the middle school bus, there's a middle school bus that's out there, and the after school bus, there may be 30 kids on the bus, but it changes from day to day. So that bus might leave the middle school, just for example's sake, at 4:15, and they might not return to the shop until 6 o'clock, because those kids we're trying to find the most efficient way to route those kids home. But if we do something where we allow, we say you have a bus on these days, fill it, and then parents have to sign up for those buses so that we know exactly who is on a bus. It'll help us tremendously.
Absolutely.
It'll help us tremendously.
Yep. And thank you, Mr. Feldman, for saying that, because we talked about that as a committee as well, that we should have systems in place to better manage who's getting on the bus, what the numbers on that bus are. And so we'll be working with the buildings to come up with those systems to manage those numbers in a more efficient manner. So we have the right amount of transportation there.
I don't know if this is actually a question we can answer, but we talked about the app for transportation. Is that something that we could parents sign up using the app for those kinds of lists? Because that would be cool and also convenient, I feel like.
Well, we haven't formally announced yet, but I have gotten some email from parents asking, is the district going to have an app soon regarding GPS? And so they know, because middle school and high school, there are common drop off and pickup areas. And so they want to know, when that bus is going to arrive. And we are pretty confident that by September of 2023, we will have a system in place that has GPS, that parents can have an app on their phone to track where their child's bus is. So we're confident in that. As far as other capabilities, like the ones you mentioned, I'm not sure yet.
As part of the upgrade we're doing right now, the parent app is coming, hoping to pilot in May, selected families to work out the bugs that we've already implemented. I don't know all of the available responses of the parent app, whether we can do that or not, but it certainly would be helpful if it would.
Didn't mean to jump the gun there, so.
And you're not wrong. Mr. Kenny's not wrong. There's just got to be some control of it at the building level. And I don't know how that would look.
Something to think about, I guess.
Something to think about.
Absolutely.
100%.
So, and the final point, we this, just because this suggestion or recommendation happens today, we're not done with our work when it comes to transportation. We don't think this is the end all and be all, that this is going to take constant review. So we're going to work with our service employee union, who oversees our bus drivers, to explore other ways to bring back contracted runs. We're working with union leaders now to see if there are other ideas out there, whether it's providing CDLs or working with members who don't have their CDL right now to possibly sub for us. Other ways that we're looking at benefits and contracts to make sure that we're retaining the drivers that we have now. It's very important, and we're doing that work continually throughout the rest of the year to make sure that we're retaining our drivers that we have on staff right now. So next up, if we're when we move forward with this, and we're obviously taking feedback from the board, from our community. I have put notes out there to our families asking for their feedback, and I will continue to do that throughout the month. But we're going to communicate the recommended new start and stop times to families via traditional methods, from my Friday memo to out on social media. And we'll ask for parent feedback for that from our families. We want that feedback to be between now and the next board study session, I believe is March 14th. We're also going to visit our PTO, PTA meetings. So myself, Mr. Feldman, Mr. Kennedy are going to go hit the circuit, and we'll talk to parents at the building level, because we want to bring it to them, and we know those are local comments and opinions they may have. So we welcome attendance at the next PTO, PTA meetings, I believe, starting at the end of February, early March. We look forward to those. I'll be collecting comments. We'll share them with the board, and I know the board will be interested to hear from families about this. And we're going to ask the board to vote everything moving forward, and it goes smoothly. We'll ask the board to vote on our recommendation on March 21st. The reason why is because we wanted to give our families enough time to plan and prepare. We do feel like any changes can be tough, but we wanted to make them least impactful, least distracted to families as possible, and give them as much time as necessary to plan for any necessary changes that are coming their way. I'll just want to reiterate two things. Number one, again, these are not easy decisions, and we know that. We know that we tried to make it as least disruptive to families with the biggest benefit that we could have. But we felt like these changes are necessary, and we have to do something in order to feel confident again that we can transport students to and from school on a daily basis. Finally, I would like to end by thanking the Building Use Committee for their time. We worked really hard, and we had a lot of great discussions and really good dialogue back and forth. So Mrs. Berlieri, Ms. Delaplant, Mr. Polino, Mr. Ryan, our parent representative, Mr. Vaughn, Steve Rosler, Scott Kennedy, Don Feldman, Toya Wilson, and I know Paul Simondera is not here, Amy Battaglia, just really thank you for your time and effort, because this group has spent a lot of nights with us, and in addition to their other duties that they have going on in their buildings and in their lives. So thank you to everybody for your hard work, and our work will continue. Like I said before, I don't see the Building Use Committee ever dissolving, because if we can talk about ways we can improve the experience for our students, there will always be a committee for that. So
I think somebody said it best. It's not if we have to make changes, it's more when.
When.
We have to do this. It's not, we really don't have an option. I know we're going to hear from parents and feedback, but
Yep.
this is going to be least disruptive so that we can still have the Sweet Home Way
yes,
and possibly bring back those things that families are used to after school.
yes. Yeah, if we didn't have to make a change, we wouldn't. And, with this, because we know it can be big for families, but really, I believe in the rest of the committee, we went around the table, we talked about ways to do a lot of things, but we really believe that this change is as least disruptive as possible, but creates a good benefit.
Any other questions?
Mike, sorry, Mr. Genestra, you had talked about doing the circuit. Are you going to also put it in the B and
Yep.
potentially maybe do a, we used to do surveys, like email blast surveys and
Yep.
that kind of thing.
So yes, absolutely. I'm gonna, I've put one article in the B. Obviously, it didn't have the recommendation in it yet, because everybody's seeing this for the first time tonight. I know I have another one. Mr. Feldman likes to remind me when they are due, but I know I have another one due soon. And we'll absolutely put that in there. I plan on Friday, putting it in my Friday memo out to families as well, with a link to my email. And please, if you have a comment, question, concern, I would recommend to any family member, any community member, to please contact us, because we pride ourselves on getting feedback, and no suggestion is too small to make this better.
In the past, we've done actual surveys. That's why I was asking if we
Yep.
were.
Yep. So, yeah, absolutely. Any method we can to get out there.
The 7:15 drop off in the high school. So that's going back 5 minutes. What if it were kept at 7:20, what would the conflict be? I mean, is there one school or is there, I just think as a board, it's important. Is it that the middle school then goes 5 minutes late and that's what we're trying to avoid?
Trying to avoid that. We're also trying to get the buses out of the parking lot as soon as possible, so we could start the elementary runs as soon as possible, because we knew that that first elementary run would have a 20-minute swing, and we wanted to keep it as close to what it is now as possible. So buying ourselves 5 minutes makes a big difference in there, because we can get those buses out of the high school parking lot and on the road to pick up our kids. So it's not more of a swing for the elementary and then pushing back the middle school.
And our high school and middle school sports teams then can still.
There's no change to what they're doing now. It will not impact their athletic schedules.
I have something that's kind of tangentially related. I'm thinking back to my question about the contracted runs. I think this is going to be a question for Mr. Johnson. And I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know. I'm just curious if it would be worthwhile to take a look at the parochial and charter school runs, which are mandated by state law that we provide those. Is it worthwhile trying to take that on at the legislative committee, talking about that with our assembly members or anything like that? Or is that kind of going to be a really hard sell?
It'd be a big lift.
Just thinking if it's happening all across the state and
I'm sure some are affected by it more than others, depending on.
I'm not sure. We always talk about like the unintended consequences of these kinds of things, but if it's an idea that helps, then.
Just for a point of interest, it's 15 miles. If you live within the district is required to transport you up to 15 miles to a school building. If you are a special education student, it's 50 miles. So there are, to Mr. Johnson's point, I think it would be a pretty heavy lift to look at that, but no, I don't know. I don't know where to even begin as far as that goes.
Yeah, the McKinney-Vento doesn't have any mileage limit, does it?
50 miles for McKinney-Vento.
Oh, it's
sorry.
50, okay.
Sorry.
I mean, for McKinney-Vento students and for special ed students, we're talking about like equity issues and
Yep.
like we need to make sure that those students are getting their services.
Yep.
If there's other schools that are overseeing the education of students at a charter school or a parochial school.
Yeah, I see, we have 44 McKinney-Vento children, somewhere in that neighborhood.
That sounds about right.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
What was the number?
44 that we transport. There is, I don't want to come off sounding unsympathetic to their plight, but there are some significant hurdles in transportation with McKinney-Vento with McKinney-Vento children. There's a lot of flexibility given to parents and things along those lines, like transportation, if, in that terms, like if they live in another district, but their home district is Sweet, that kind of thing. There's a lot of leeway there, and it's difficult because each of those runs, those McKinney-Vento runs, generally one kid, which means one driver, or one contracted run, that's predominantly, that's much of the increase that you've seen in our contracted transportation runs, because it's not cheap. No, it's not cheap.
And I'll just couple that with saying that those students, many of them have been through, trauma, to say the least, and they're being displaced. So there's a balance there, and, and they have a right to come to Sweet Home. And so, Scott and his staff are doing a great job, or our contracted runner doing a great job to service all of our students. So, there's challenges there. And I don't think we have to plan for that, because we don't see a decrease in the amount of students needing that support.
I
For
would
sure.
I would agree with that, just because of our location.
Yeah.
The county places many of those children in the hotels and motels on Niagara Falls Boulevard. And then if a couple of weeks down the road, a month down the road, they find temporary housing in Lockport, because they were originally placed here, the transportation onus falls on us. So then we're going to Lockport to bring the kids back. And it's difficult. It's
And
difficult.
That's part of why I was like specifically focusing on the charter school element of it, because from a legislative standpoint, I think that's probably the easiest one to tackle from a certain point of view. I don't know how you would go about advocating for the other categories. It's, you can't really.
And just
Hard.
for clarity purposes, when we're doing specifically our one student per run, if we're doing them our district is our district drivers are driving them, they're not taking a full 66 passenger
No,
bus. They're
No,
not
no.
necessarily a.
Yep.
Um,
Yes. Yep. Thank you. Anything else?
I do one other thing. I mean, I do understand that's not a question of if and when. What are the things as a board you would say, if you're sitting in our shoes, there are the concerns about doing this? Like seems like a lot of positives, I guess. What would make this, what's a risk of this plan, or what, is there something?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, because I want to make it clear that, again, I will say this is not the solution to all of our transportation issues. So one of the fears that we have is that someday we'll still have to say no, even with this, and people are going to think, well, you changed our daily lives, you changed our schedule, and you still can't do this. We are trying to, for lack of a better term, get blood out of a stone, and we're trying to make it work with the current staff and roster that we have as far as our drivers go. So this will not be the end of our transportation conversation. This will not be the end of our transportation driver shortage or issues. That the help wanted sign is on the front lawn, and we definitely need drivers. So one of the fears we have is that we want to communicate properly that this is a way that we can continue to drive students back and forth to school in a manner that gives us some ease and flexibility. As far as other, negatives, it will be a disruption. Even, the biggest swing is 20 minutes for group one of the elementary. I'm sure we will hear from families, and we want to hear from families about, their work lives being disrupted. And we took that into account as a committee as well. And we wanted to make sure, again, that it was a goal to try and be as least disruptive as possible. But we want to hear that feedback. As far as other, negatives or anything that can come about it, we talked about that as a committee as well. And I think, those are the two big ones that we saw, Mr. Lible.
The only other negative that maybe I can think of is I just heard today that there's some states out there that are mandating that high schools start late. I hope down the line, I think Josh had brought this up before.
Yep.
I hope down the line we can revisit that maybe our high schoolers not start so early, because there's so many studies out there that say they really should be the ones starting later.
No, thanks for saying that, Mrs. Jason, because that's another thing we talked about as a committee and a group. We just didn't want to impact sports after school in a way that would be because moving that around that's a big change.
It also affects families that may need their high schoolers.
Right, for
home.
babysitting.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
The question is probably for Scott. It's following up on what Kaylee was saying. When we send kids on a bus to the charter school, say, like she said, do we share with any other school districts on that? Because I know at least some districts must be driving literally by other ones to get their kids to some of those districts.
Services are always an option. Currently, most of our charter schools are contracted. I am aware that CSAT is contracted or is sharing services with Kentucky
Okay,
under our contract.
thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you again to all the committee members for being here tonight and put another meeting on the schedule soon with the smiles on their faces. So happy Valentine's Day.
Hi together, where would you rather
Thank you for
be
spending
than
your-
right here with us?
And please apologize to your significant others for it. Thank you.
They all wanted to be here. It's fine.
And I don't know
Dismiss
if,
the group.
well, if they had any comments, you are more than welcome, if that's okay to say. But if not, or any questions, or you're good to go. Go home unless you want to stay.
Go home and spend a little time with your families.
My heart is breaking. My heart is breaking. They don't want to stay with us.
Yeah.
Valentines are all leaving.
Thanks, everybody. That's it for me tonight.
So you don't need a superintendent update.
No, that's it.
That's it. Beautiful.
Yeah,
We've updated enough.
we've spent a lot of time together.
All right. That takes us to upcoming events, which we have numerous ones. Pop concerts coming up on the 16th. That's always enjoyable. All right, so next that takes us to new business. We're gonna pull one special education out, numbers 1 and 2. So could I have a motion to roll into 1, the B, C, D, E, F, and G?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
All right, let's go through this with one by one. So we pulled out A. B is monthly financials. Any questions? Stop me. C is our revised policy second reading. Any questions on A through F? D is our revised policy, our first reading, A through F. Oh, keep going. E is acceptance of donation. F is our overnight field trip request. And G is our appointment of our deputy district clerk. Any questions, comments, concerns? So we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Josh. So that brings us to special education. Do I have a motion to approve the special education? Numbers 1 and 2.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
second,
Any conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Anyone abstaining?
Aye.
Great, thank you. That passed. Thank you. All right, next that takes us to informational items. Let's go start with you. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. So it's nice to be back. First, I'd just like to apologize for not being here next week. I had a lower back injury, so I was just not able to come.
Yeah.
So
You feeling better?
yeah. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Last week we had our Sweetheart Spirit Week. And that was a success. A lot of people participated and we saw a lot of school spirit. So that was a lot of fun. We had our pep rally, which was also an overwhelming success. We had performances from our cheer teams, our drill team. We had a bunch of different games that represented each different sports team. Like the swimming team had one game, the bowling had another game, basketball had a game, and so on. And we had a lot of student participation, and we handed out gift cards for winners. So that was just a really fun event. We also, the dance was also a success on Saturday. We had over 400 students attend, And so it was definitely a very good experience for everyone involved. Some things that we're working on right now, this Thursday, this Friday, excuse me. This Friday, we're going, student government is going to Maplemere to present at their leadership assembly. We're going to be presenting on Black History Month, and we have a very fun presentation planned. It's interactive. There's going to be prizes for all the students, and it's just going to be a really good time, as well as a very educational moment for everyone there. And student government is very excited to go, and I know that Mr. Ryan has been working very closely with us, so it's just going to be a really good experience for everyone. So that's exciting. Central Kitchen, we have a date planned to, we have a meeting planned. It's going to be after break. So we're excited to go there and finally, catch up with Central Kitchen.
What will the agenda be for that? What do you?
So excuse me, I have it here. As of right now, there's a couple of different points and they're kind of scattered, but if you give me just a little bit of time, it's here. The general agenda is going to be, we had some environmental concerns for the environmental action thing, not necessarily concerns, but we wanted to bring back the recycling bins. And we know that was a thing that we want to do last year. And so we want to promote, advocate for that again this year.
I didn't know we didn't have them. I thought
No, we don't have them anymore. So we want to bring those back. We also just want to talk about where like kind of communicate what students are saying about some of the lunches, because we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from students about certain lunches, and so we wanted to kind of communicate that to the Central Kitchen and kind of tell them what students are liking, because there's a lot of new, not necessarily new, but like relatively new, different meals that are being served that a lot of students are enjoying. And so we just wanted to communicate that. So, and there are a lot of other things on the agenda too, but those are just two of the big things that we're going to be communicating. So the high school, Miss Mansell is leading the multicultural night on March 2nd. That's going to be a really fun event. We're holding, Miss Mansell is leading it. She's holding tryouts for it, and there's going to be a bunch of different people performing, and it's just going to be a really fun night in general. Heritage Heights has also invited student government to help out with their Taste of Heritage event on March 9th. So that's something the student government is excited to help out with, and different people who are in student government are hoping to attend that event. And so I believe it was last Sunday, but it might have been the previous Sunday. We had District Fest. That was a very fun event. It was definitely different to have it in the gym, but it definitely worked out. And it was really fun to see, it's been many years since District Fest has happened. It was since before the pandemic. So it was really nice to have everyone there together, have all the different grade levels and, come together as musicians. And as you stated, the Pops concert is on Thursday. So that's exciting as well.
Thank you. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Peter.
Nothing new since last week.
Hey, Scott.
Just a couple of things. Both Kaylee and I attended virtually the high school PTSA meeting. It was probably the shortest one I've ever seen. We were done in 24 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. They were doing a Delta Sonic fundraiser and they only sold 2 of the things on it. They're going to drop that. I guess a few other groups are doing it too.
But they're not super concerned about it because they're still doing like
Pretty
super
good.
Yeah,
well.
they're in good
Yeah.
shape. Exactly. Yeah. They're doing basket raffle again at the craft fair and they've already started getting donations for that. That's pretty much all I got on that part. I spent Friday morning online virtually for the NSBA's Capital Conference for the year. Started off with a welcome by Jay Kim. He's the youth governor for the YMCA for New York. There's one of those in every state. And his biggest point was listen to the youth. They have a lot to say. They had a conversation with Commissioner Rosa and Chancellor Young. Didn't get a chance to ask them a lot of questions because their answers were pretty long on each of the questions that they did. They were concerned about support systems for the students for some of their biggest meals. They did discuss the need for getting meals that for them. We had Later
For
on,
the summer?
now, all because of the federal money going away, but still everybody's pushing to still get free meals for kids everywhere. We had two representatives from the governor's office later, and they asked one of those, asked them about what they thought. And they said, yeah, free meals for kids are great. The Fed should pay for it. I mean, it was bang, bang. That was, off our table, right? As fast as possible. And it was not in the budget. And we also had Senator Mayer and Assemblyman Benedetto. They chair respectively the Senate and the Assembly Committees for Education. They talked about a few things. They were both happy with the state budget. They did say they need some more. Both have concerns about what the governor's proposing for additional charter schools. They were asked about APPR, and they both kind of leaned in on that they'd rather see it go back to a local control thing rather than what the state has done with it. And trying to find my other notes here on that. Somebody asked them a little bit about the financial, the foundation aid formula on that one too. And that one, they did not agree with each other even on where they thought that should go. Assemblyman Benedetto was basically, you need to redo it and get it done right. Senator Mayer was, we need to make sure we get the statistics, so we're going from this century with our numbers, but she didn't see any need to go much further with it for that. I think that covers the majority of it. There, the end of it was NISBA giving people information about Lobby Day, which is tomorrow in Albany. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend this year, but I think we're having our biggest contingent from Erie County that we've had in years there. Last I heard, I think it was 17 people that were going, and they had meetings with at least 7 of our local representatives at this point. That's it for me.
All right, thank you. Josh?
Nothing new from last week, Marianne. Thank you.
Well, there kind of is, because we all sat together at the budget meeting and you were there.
True.
So our wonderful budget meeting. So we were just glad to have you back in person. Kaylee?
I attended the PTSA meeting with Mr. Johnson. I also just wanted to say, Musab, that I love that you guys are working like in the elementary schools and really just across the whole district. I think it's so cool. And I'm so glad to hear that it's not just happening at Maplemere, but it's happening in all these other areas as well. I'm also super supporting you for bringing back recycling bins. More recycling all over the place. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I attended the audit committee meeting with you, Marianne, and some of other district officials. That was Monday. Yeah, Monday.
Riveting.
And yeah, that was good meeting. And the other thing I want to mention is I attended the teaching and learning committee meeting last week. We're making good progress. We are continuing to focus on, building objectives, and 2 subgroups we're divided into now. And one is a high school and middle school. I'm on the elementary group. We kind of have an outline of future focus, what are the qualities and things we're looking for. And then taking those qualities and saying, okay, what are the actual implementation pieces? And just as an example, like my group really focused on the leader and me elements in the elementary school and that program and the value and benefits of that. And again, this is early on, so we're still discussing it, but I think it's important just to give people a flavor of what's going on in those meetings and what are we talking about. So yeah, I think, we're really doing some interesting and exciting work, and, it's a lot of enthusiasm with the group, and, building some objectives, both short term, so we can have those victories, and also looking out longer term in terms of, really what do we want to see implemented, and things that we can do that'll really make a difference for, the students, their experience, and I wouldn't say we're hard into the curriculum, but it's more of the bigger picture of the skill set and qualities that are important to help students get to the next level, so elementary, what are the qualities to help get them to middle school that they can take with them, middle school to high school to college and to work.
Which Scott and I saw over at Heritage, Mr. Perry has papers of what teachers expect of kindergarten kids and what are they looking at to get up to first grade, those skills, and he's got them divided into categories. And I think we'll see more of that at our presentation next month over at Heritage, but it's kind of along that same line.
And I would just say, as someone who went to elementary school in the 80s, you know, a lot's changed. It's been a learning experience for me in terms of, you know, some of the things I said, well, what about this? And yeah, we've done that for 10 years, you know, because it's, you know, it's different, right? Like literature and, you know, even, you know, the way things are taught now are so much more connected than, you know, when I went to school, it was much more fact based and memorization. And so, you know, I think it's a good committee, and I think we're going to have some nice things to share with the larger community.
Thank you. Amy.
I don't have really much. I do, fun fact, have a opportunity to do Leader in Me training tomorrow at work. I had contemplated not going because I had had the training through the district, and I actually interested to see how they're going to bring it to the higher ed level and what they're not training the whole campus. So it'll be interesting to see where they want to go with that, but a good refresher course is always good.
Teach it.
My kid's good.
Yeah.
My kid's good. But other than that, I really don't have anything. There's been a lot of things most recently at work that really are paralleling a lot of the conversations we're having. You know, Brian, you just mentioned as an elementary kid in the 80s, you know, I remember when my teacher said to me, well, you're not going to have a calculator with you the whole time. You got to know your math facts. And now we have a calculator with us the whole time. So the current conversation at the higher ed level is regarding AI and how AI is being used to write papers, and then students are turning them in, and what are we going to do with that? And, you know, my particular chair had said, actually, in the 80s, they were saying you're not going to have a calculator with you. Now the conversation needs to flip that when AI does your writing, you still have to do work. You still have to put your spin on it, your thoughts into it. And, you know, it's funny to watch those things at work, but then to come here and listen to the same conversations again is like, I'm having a little bit of a moment. So sorry.
Absolutely.
So Mrs. Battaglia, you mentioned AI. We just found out probably an hour ago before the meeting tonight that, and I wish Mrs. Barilari was still here because she put in our letter of support, but the University of Buffalo was awarded a highly competitive grant by the National Science Foundation to establish a national institute that develops artificial intelligence systems that identify and assist young children with speech and or language processing challenges. And it's a 5-year, $20 million grant that UB was awarded. And I am very proud and happy to say that the Sweet Home Central School District is a partner with UB on this work. And I'm not sure what that means yet as far as our partnership goes, but they asked us for a letter of support. Mrs. Barilari wrote the letter of support probably, I think she said a year ago.
Yeah. In
April. And so we found out today that we were, that they won and that we are named a partner in that work. As a matter of fact, I got a call from a colleague of mine who begged that his district partner with Sweet Home to be partners with UB. And I said, well, let me see what this is all about first. But I'm just saying it's so exciting that other districts are calling us and asking us how we got.
But it's such a different way to think about things. But when she said that in terms of, you know, I'm going to go 20 years ago, but I know it's 30, but teachers were saying, you know, you're not going to have a calculator with you. You have to know your math facts. And now they're teaching the why behind the math facts instead of, time testing and, and when we talk about writing and what that's going to look like in 20 years or 30 years from now. And just, it's
Very cool. stuff.
fascinating. Sorry, I got off on a
We're
whole
excited.
different
No,
tangent because
You triggered that. So
It-
thank you.
it triggered. So sorry, but I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Heritage had their PTA meeting last night. They discussed current goals, the main one being to increase communication to student families and faculties, and of course, as all PTAs do, increase parent involvement and volunteers. They had a skating party and it was very well attended. They are working on the Leader in Me #4, Think Win-Win. So it's just good to see that school starting to really go and buy in and go gung ho on the Leader in Me. They are doing a Spirit Week coming up, and they talked about, they're already starting to talk about Teacher Appreciation Week. Let's see, as Brian mentioned, we met with the state auditor. We all attended for the budget meeting, and my daughter was cute. She is a reading specialist at Cleve Hill, and she came home this week and said, "Mom, I'm really excited because I was appointed to the DEI committee. Do you know anything about that?" Okay, so they're just starting, and it's just, we are so far ahead, and I just praise the group for really having the foresight to jump into that and know that this is something we really needed to do and work on. And we are so far ahead of, same thing with our buses. We're kind of on the cutting edge of this. And I think other schools are going to look to us and say, tell us what you're doing. So it's just kind of neat. Anybody have anything else? That's it. All right, next it takes us to our second open session. Any takers? All right. And that takes us to personnel. We're going to break this down a little bit into personnel. 1, teaching administrative. A, our regular appointments. B, our substitutes. We are going to pull out C. So we are only voting on A and B, pulling out C. Could I have a motion to accept personnel as
So moved.
stated? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any concerns, questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Josh. Next, we'll be voting on C, interscholastic activities and appointments. Could I have a motion to accept teaching and administrative, letter C?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
And I,
Aye. Any noes? Anyone who abstains?
I abstain.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll be voting on service, A, regular, and B, substitutes. Could I have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. And could I have a motion to adjourn general session? We will not be going to executive session.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?